What's interesting about the history of the idea of development is that it does give us a lot of insight into where we are today in development. A lot of what the book is complaining about going on today is this sort of technocratic approach to development, in which the sort of prevailing model, to exaggerate and simplify a little bit, is sort of that we will have a bunch of experts in various fields advise the local autocrat on the technical solutions to material poverty, and we call that development. And it's really quite an authoritarian model of development, because we are kind of presuming that the autocrat is just this sort of benevolent autocrat that will take the advice of the experts and do all the technical fixes to the problems of the poor, such as, say, for a problem like malnutrition or vitamin deficiency, it's a simple technical fix like distributing very cheap vitamin A capsules. And so that's seemingly a straightforward technical fix, but in our prevailing mindset, we hand these long lists of technical fixes over to autocrats, because we work with a local government in power, usually autocratic. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about the rights of the poor, about the political rights of the poor, the human rights of the poor, their right to choose and consent what happens to them. It's almost as if we think of development as something that we, meaning the experts and the autocrats, do to the poor, with or without their consent. British colonial Africa, of course, had fairly obvious rights violations that it wanted to overlook also, most of all that the African subjects of the British Empire had no rights under the British Empire. Moreover, in certain parts of the British Empire, they are being dispossessed by European settlers. There was a specific flaring up in 1925 in Kenya when white settlers were taking away the locals' lands, and there was the brewing of an indigenous rebellion against the settlers. And once again, the technocratic ideas came to the rescue. A British missionary proposed to the Rockefeller Foundation a survey, once again trying to deal with a problem of one race violating the rights of another race, with once again what would be met with was the assembly and the dispassionate study of the facts. If only we could get a technocratic approach to relieving the material poverty of the natives, maybe they would not notice so much that their rights were being violated by European settlers. So again, it would just be the usefulness of this technocratic idea to change the subject away from rights violations. So this survey took a while to come together. It was finally published in 1938, a volume of 1,831 pages. If you don't want to buy my book, I recommend you buy this book instead, 1,831 pages. It's available on eBay. It's called an African Survey. Try to get the original 1938 version. I have it in my office. The African Survey announced a more scientific approach to the problems of health and material well-being in Africa. It sounds very modern, a very modern phrase, as if it came out of the Poverty Action Lab. And it had some very specific suggestions which sound very familiar. So here's an example of 4 different technical solutions that were proposed by the African Survey in 1938 to 4 different problems. I'm not going to read the slide to you because hopefully you can all see it. So for 4 different problems, the African Survey's technical answer in 1938 was exactly the same as that of another mammoth technical survey that would be done 70 years later by the United Nations. Another large team of technical experts led by, I'm forgetting who, I think it may have been Angelina Jolie, but I'll check again on who the author of the UN survey was in 2005. May have been somebody here at Columbia, you never know. So anyway, this UN survey, exactly the same technical answers as in 1938. For 4 different problems: malaria, malnutrition, soil erosion, and clean water. The exact same technical answers. So this tells us a couple of things. One is the technocratic approach is remarkably persistent. And it's remarkably persistent despite having failed, because obviously if the technical answers were already available 70 years ago and are still cited as being in need of remedy 70 years later. They were not done over the preceding 70 years. I think that's a fair conclusion. They did not succeed in solving the problem over the intervening 70 years. So what the technocratic ideas were very useful for was justifying the British Empire, as usual. My final conclusion is simply that authoritarian technocratic development has carried the day for nearly 100 years. 100 years has been enough. It's time for it to be over.